he's got this new bill as part of his effort to fight diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in colleges and universities in Florida. And so he signed this measure aimed at prohibiting them from spending money on these sorts of programs, saying, if you look at the way this has actually been implemented across the country, DEI is better viewed as standing for discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination.
Whoa.
Am I clever? Do you love me? Why don't you love me? But anyway, along the way, during his whole try hard thing that he's doing there, he's doing a lot of damage. And so let's break down the damage. This is the damage report after all. Under the new law, Florida's public colleges are prohibited from spending state or federal money on DEI efforts. These programs often assist colleges in increasing student and faculty diversity, which can apply to race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, and socioeconomic status. The law also forbids public colleges from offering general education courses, which are part of the required curriculum for all college students that, quote, distort significant historical events, teach, quote, identity politics, or are based on theories that systemic racism, sexism, oppression, or privilege are inherent in the institutions of the United States and were created to maintain social, political, or economic inequities. So the basic idea is if you want to do a course where you focus on what slavery really was, why the Civil War really happened, how we got to the Civil Rights Movement, all that, that will be giving a distorted accounting of historical events. But if you imply that like it wasn't really that bad, then that's apparently fine. They use this weaselly, vague language, so there's nothing for a judge to really rule on. It's purely ideological. What distorts it? The whole point of critical race theory or whatever is to have a better, more grounded in reality accounting of what actually happened. They're just defining it away as distorting history. They would say, the academics, that they are having to deal with the fact that our education system has always distorted history and it's finally time for an accounting for it. But when he's chosen the judges and when he's chosen the oversight boards, it's gonna come down to whatever his cronies want. Emma, what do you think?
The right loves to naturalize things that already exist and pretend that they were created by God in some way. I mean, it's the way fundamentalists think, but that includes the teaching of history, I guess, up until the 1960s, where they'd like to return it to, or we've gone way too far, let's return to the factual history. We have never, ever had a true 100% factual recounting of history. It's been impossible. I covered this last week, but the Washington Post spoke to a researcher named Jonathan Eeg, who went to the Duke University archives and found the transcripts of Martin Luther King's interview with author Alex Haley for Playboy, and the transcripts completely contradict the quotes that were given to Playboy that were attributed to King, which were very critical of Malcolm X. What he actually said was entirely different. And those quotes had been, and this is just one of many examples, but those quotes had been used, and I remember reading about them as a kid, to cite the vast differences and acrimonious relationship between the two activists, when in reality they were both radicals. One was a Christian radical, the other was a Muslim radical. They had a little bit of differing philosophies, but the division between the two has been a part of like the Santa Clausification of Martin Luther King, as opposed to actually making it clear that no, his edges were sharp, activism was tough, and brutal at times, and both King and Malcolm X were engaged in that. That's just one example of how our history has been completely distorted up to this point in favor of narratives that serve capitalism, that serve patriarchy, and that of course serve white supremacy. And in that instance, that was a way to make King seem not as scary as he was when he died. When he died, he had a disapproval rating that was astronomical. So that's just an example that I'm citing there. But all of our history is like that. It's tilted to deify our founding fathers as if they're saints, as if they're high priests in this country. It speaks about our institutions in this country in this lofty way, which hasn't necessarily, of course, been the case for marginalized communities. We completely whitewash indigenous history in this country. So what these diversity, equity, inclusion, or CRT programs are trying to do is marginally correct that record And that is such a threat to reactionary conservatives like Ron DeSantis that of course we see this kind of crap.
Yeah. And also, so like the way that they in Florida, especially the conservatives, talk about schools, it betrays this expansion of the concept of propaganda that's existed in the media to schools in such a specific way where they will continually attack Democrats or bisexual second grade teachers of propagandizing to kids, with propaganda being defined as only anything that might lead to the kids not being conservative, but also a thing that is said in the same way that the media can be biased by the things that they say. Don't focus on how propaganda can work in that controlling what is said and what isn't said can be way more important. The media not covering a topic can be way more corrosive than the way that it covers certain topics.
Exactly.
And in the same way in schools, saying a thing is propaganda, legally barring the teaching of subjects is also a propaganda. That's what you're doing. You are attempting to control the education and ideological development of an entire generation. That's all that this is. And it's convenient for them.
Of course, and also I wanna add that this is a way to largely undercut education broadly, particularly public education. The right is terrified of institutions like, whether it's Medicare, Social Security, or programs like just public school being essentially staples for the American people, and then they can be like, oh, I'm gonna rely on the state. We should have more government, right? We should have more of these kinds of things. And so this is a way for them to go after public education in a racist way, but they are hamstringing teachers and making it or professors and making it impossible for them to do their jobs in this way, making it so onerous that it is a multi-pronged attack, but one of the prongs is certainly attacking education.
Yeah, and they're treating education just like the government, where you might think, well, making it so that a thing can't function, well, that hurts everyone equally because it can't do what the libs want, but it can't do what the conservatives want. No, they don't want anything to be done. If schools don't work, that's fine. Someone who was quoting George Carlin is saying they only want us to be smart enough to operate the machines. They don't care if it results in the kids being stupider. And if the government grinds to a halt, well, then it can't pass laws that hurt the wealthy who are in charge. So again, it's one of the most important things that I try to stress on the show is there is virtually nothing about politics that is actually symmetrical. It is inherently asymmetrical. Something being done that hurts both sides almost never hurts both sides equally. So bear that in mind. That said, I do want to get ahead to the second part of this. So, I want to briefly mention though, we don't have this graphic. I just want to let you know, when it comes to the DEI stuff, there was this reallocation of funds that DeSantis was in charge of that apparently went to, and we're just getting the beginnings of this from the lever, that went to a bunch of extremely underperforming financial institutions, and it's being portrayed as payback for donations. Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make fiscal sense for the Florida government to have gone with these banks because they underperformed other ones. We're just at the beginnings of understanding what that might be about. So I just want to let you know that this DEI thing is not necessarily just a culture war thing. It also could have a massive financial corruption aspect to it, but we'll see what happens as we go.